Hi, I'm Noel Kingsbury, and with my colleague Annie Guilfoyle, we run Garden Masterclass, which we started 5 years ago to do educational workshops for garden and landscape people in the British Isles.
Hello, and I'm Annie Guilfoyle. We still do live events, in-person events all over the British Isles and also into Europe, in fact. But since COVID happened globally, we now have an online program and we do webinars as well. So we are now a global garden community.
All our information-packed webinars are recorded and they're available from our website. They're pay to view, but members get a discount.
And this is a recording of our weekly public service broadcast that we like to call our Thursday Garden Chat. It goes out at 6 o'clock on a Thursday live, and that's 6 o'clock UK time. We talk to people from all over the world, designers, gardeners, horticulturalists, nursery people, botanists. And so it's always a great range of people and always very exciting.
We've got recordings here on YouTube, but masses more on our website, and our members will have access to even more. In fact, we've got hundreds of hours on our online library.
And take a look at our website and see what's coming up on our diary pages. Everything is listed in the diary, so webinars, live events, everything that we do, it's all in a chronological order, and you can click through to a link to get in more information or to buy tickets. And you may want to sign up for a monthly newsletter, our mailing list, or you might like to become a member.
We do these weekly events for free, as indeed do our speakers, but we have costs, which is why we really appreciate donations, and you can make donations from our homepage.
Well, we really hope that you enjoyed this recording, and please come back and try.
Now, Annie is busy this evening, and so it's over to Christine. Christine has been an enormous help and support to us over the past year as we feel our way through this, very novel digital educational world. And she will be Annie this evening. So
I don't know if I can possibly be Annie, but it's safe to say that Noel and Annie have let the Americans loose on you tonight. Who knows?
Who knows what'll happen? Now,
I said that you have to tell us, Noel, where you are right now. This is not the typical background we see. I'm
actually in the sunset in a campground south of Lisbon. We're off on a 10-day trip in our camper van, or as the Americans would call it, an RV, or an autocaravana in Portuguese. We're going to the Mediterranean Garden Association of Portugal Spring Fair over the weekend down in the Algarve.
You should have known there were plants involved in this somewhere.
And hopefully some garden visiting as well. Now, Christine, when we were talking about what's coming up, you got particularly excited about the topiary.
I love Darren Larigo. He is probably, if you haven't seen the other Garden Masterclass video with him, you really should give it a watch, because I think you will want to come to this event. He is probably the most entertaining speaker on pruning I've ever heard in my life. And just so passionate about what he's doing. And I'm also absolutely green with envy about the film opening, because it sounds like a wonderful setting. The film's going to be great, and I'm kind of a foodie. The food sounds pretty good too.
No, Yo Valley Organic Garden is quite an amazing place. And this will be one amazing film. And of course, we hope this film will be the first of, I don't know about many, but certainly at least the first of several. It's a commitment and an considerable investment we're making, and we believe people will enjoy them, people will learn from them, but also just very important as documentation.
Exactly. I think it's when you see a garden that's beautiful change radically just because somebody else bought the property, you realize how ephemeral they are. And all of this documentation is so important, because gardens come and go, and you can really capture the inspiration and capture the what you can't see anymore. So I think it's exciting to be doing them.
Great. So I think, Christine, over to you.
Over to me. Hi, everybody. If you didn't hear earlier, if you just came in, I'm Christine Reid. I am a gardener, fine gardener and designer from Stamford, Connecticut. I used to live closer to the area where our guest tonight is from, so let me introduce you to him. Tonight we have with us, today, or this morning, depending on where you are, we have with us Nick McCullough. And Nick is joining us from 9 hours away from me in central Ohio. Welcome, Nick. So glad you're with us.
Thank you.
This is his book. Let me get it up so you can see it. And again, you can see that this is a collaborative authorship here. American Roots, Lessons and Inspiration from the Designers Reimagining Our Home Gardens. Nick, first of all, designer is a term that doesn't necessarily mean professional designer in this case, right?
Yeah, in this case, very much so. Not necessarily classically trained or from university or anything like that. And some are, but some aren't. But it's really, I guess, a creative's perspective.
And what they have in
They're
common
personal.
is that you found their gardens inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's, and we'll jump into that, but seeing inside someone's intimate personal space is really special, and I've been fortunate to do that over the years, and that was really the kind of the major theme behind the book, is sharing these amazing American gardens that don't get seen or not talked about nearly enough, and the creativity here runs rampant, and we're so proud to showcase just these 20 gardeners. This could be a series of 150, 200 gardeners, right? Maybe this is the first in the series, but yeah, to see what's going on kind of behind the scenes in these creative gardens.
So this book is somewhat of a COVID baby, is it not? Tell us about how this book came about.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, it was, we had always had a great relationship with Timber Press, who ended up being our publisher here. And they always said, well, if you had an idea, just pitch it to us, and when it's right, it's right. And so we'll sign up and go for it. And so this was one of those. COVID happened. We knew we had an idea, and I had been in all these intimate gardens of all of our friends, and I'm like, that's it. Like, we need to tell a story behind these really creative people's gardens across the United States. And honestly, Monty Don's, I love Monty, but he did the American Gardens, this TV series. And I got to the end, and I just felt like it wasn't the whole story. And so
I got to the end of your book, and I felt like it wasn't the whole story too.
Exactly.
There's a lot
just the beginning
that hasn't been explored, right?
Right, and that's it. And especially United States, coast to coast gets a lot of, side to side gets a lot of publicity between California and basically the East Coast and New England. But in the middle, it gets skipped a lot, and so and that's where a lot of some of the best gardens are. And so we want to shed light on a little bit more of the country and tell it through the 19 of our friends who helped create these gardens.
Is it hard to talk about your friends? I mean, can you stand back and be the designer and be analytical?
Yeah, well, sure. Hindsight's 2020, right? But yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, that was, I think, one of the biggest pressures of writing this book is to do these gardens, to do them justice, to tell the story accurately. And but I don't think we held punches. And I think the unique thing is me being the primary photographer in this book as well.
That is quite unique.
Really, I think it tells a story through the lens of a garden designer.
Yes.
And also through, really my perspective on these gardens as well. So yeah, I think it's pretty, it's different take on a book. So
I also want to give a shout out to your co-authors here. A woman named Allison McCullough, the last name as you. Would she be your wife?
Yeah, she is my.
Tell us about her involvement in the book.
I don't know if she's gonna. Are you gonna jump on here, Allison?
She may not want to, but if she, but we have to acknowledge what she had to say.
Yeah.
This book is so, let me just quickly show you an example. First of all, it's loaded with pictures, lots and lots of photographs of the gardens. And then there are kind of designer's notebook pictures like this, where you see details. And there's another similar type page where you see the plants with their Latin names, botanical names, and that's actually mostly the only place you see them, because the text is written with common names. And Allison was very involved, as I understand it, with creating this layout. You delivered the book.
Yeah.
So, book, right?
I mean, essentially, we delivered the book nearly completely finished. So Allison took everything that we did, and she claims she's not a gardener. She's
there are other talents relevant in writing a book.
Yeah, well, and that's it. Like we're very fortunate in our business that we control every aspect of everything we're doing. We're very spoiled that way, and so we had to make sure that this was the correct vision and layout that we wanted it to be done. And for people who haven't been involved in publishing or writing, you know, it can be very you can basically turn over your photographs, and then the publisher lays it out for you. Everything you see here was laid out by Allison. Most of photography was taken by me, and so you know, that was a big thing for us, because we wanted to make sure it was the right perspective. So Allison did a fantastic job of laying out the entire book, and Timber Press was just blown away when we turned it in, because how complete it was. When we hit our due date, which they were like, "How did you do that?" First of all, because, well, we'll get into that. I like the timing of all this, but and then also it was, you know, very, very complete in its storytelling.
Would you like to share your screen now and show us some of the gardens that you visited? This is
we're gonna go on quite a journey.
22,000 miles, right? This journey?
Yeah, well, probably more than that, actually, when it comes down to it. Yeah, so it was quite a journey that we went on over the course of 2021. Essentially, COVID hit 2020, and we started on this journey. And so I'll jump into this, and we'll go from there. So my name is Nick McCullough. Obviously, I'm a garden designer. We also own a design, build, and fine gardening maintenance company in Columbus, Ohio. And I was very fortunate to study at Ohio State University, but I was also very fortunate. I studied garden design in England in the Lake Districts at Myerscough College. Really unbelievable experience, really set me on the path in which I'm on now. So I got to go spend time with John Brooks. I got to hang out with Arabella Lennox Boyd, just these characters that really set me on the path in which, of gardening. We're going to talk a little bit about me, our company, defining American roots, and then these common threads that we found throughout the book. So McCalls Landscape Nursery, our whole goal is to create exceptional landscaping for extraordinary properties. And we do that. We have about 35 employees 35 to 40 employees who work for us, from the fine gardening to the construction, all of it. And our designs are very plant centric. And by that, I mean very, very plant heavy. It seems like a lot of American design is really hardscape, surface first, and that is certainly not what we do. And a lot of these are very, very plant driven designs. And, you know, we're so fortunate that here in the United States, we had these amazing prairie plants that, are native here, are adapted to our very wide range of soils and climates. And so essentially, you know, these amazing plants like this Eryngium yuccifolium here, thanks to Pete and all his work he's done over cultivating these amazing plants and telling the story of them on the High Line and through all his gardens, have really, went to Europe and came back, and they're cool now because of all these, this exposure they've had. So, again, we're very fortunate. Columbus is a amazing kind of metropolitan area. It's about 2 million people, plus or minus. So it's a large area. And so we get to really work on some amazing homes, some amazing gardens. And like I said, our whole goal is to sustain and be ecological through our plant diversity in which we choose for our gardens. Like I said, we use a lot of American prairie natives, but also the idea of blending aesthetic and form and creating something that's very beautiful is also, very forefront. And like I said, our goal is to sustain through plant diversity. And that we're very fortunate. We also have a greenhouse. Our greenhouse is private. It's only for our own consumption, only for my own projects. And so really, we get to pick these amazing species, these amazing cultivars that we're reading about in Gardens Illustrated or Fine Gardening, and stuff that we're seeing these cultivars around the world. And we're finding a lot of them do fantastic here. So from my obsession of Sanguisorbas to Eryngiums, we grow about 30,000 plants a year on the perennial side, and that's for our own designs. And one job could take most of that. So we really fluctuate on, and we use a lot of other great nurseries across the country as well. But so we get into a wide range of stuff. This was a project that Alice and I designed called Oak Grove. It's a wedding venue, and we found this 103 years old now, Lord and Burnham greenhouse on Craigslist that was going to be torn down. And so they said, just come and get it if you can. So it was about 200 miles from north of us. We numbered it, took it down, brought it down here. This is a wedding venue, and this is kind of the scale of work in which we do, creating in essence, really inspiring through design, inspiring through this tactile interaction with nature as well. And of course, being a garden designer, so Allison and I did the architectural concept on this entire project. Allison did the interiors, and then obviously the gardens. Very important to us to tell this story of plants and really taking a crowd that might not necessarily be very excited about interaction with nature and inspiring them through different techniques, different plantings. And this is kind of my silver tone on tone study that we did here, and it's like an 80-foot long border of just silver and green textural driven plants. And so really we wanted the space to be very neutral and be really so the bride can put their spin on the project. Again, was something that's big in what we do is container design. Certainly it's a great way to put a spin on a garden and change it up seasonally. And so this is a scale of containers in which we do, and you can see Allison here. Allison's not 3 feet tall. She is a normal sized woman, but you can see the containers here and how large they are. And just we change these out seasonally as well at this project. So yeah, it's really something that we really enjoy doing as a company. So defining the American garden was a big part in what we thought it was a vernacular that we needed, or vocabulary we needed to tell as an American, to the rest of the world, and also show these inspiring stories. So I've been very fortunate. A seed was planted many years ago. I've been lucky to be traveling across the country speaking for many years. And this is my friend Dan Benarsic. Dan is one of the gardeners at Chanticleer Gardens, which I think is one of America's finest gardens. It's open to the public throughout the warm seasons of the month. It will open up about a week, I believe, and we'll close again right around Halloween. And Dan was great. I've been able to spend a lot of time in Dan's garden. It's in the Philadelphia area. It's about an 8-9 hour drive here from me, but I was very fortunate to be a garden designer, a guest designer at the Philadelphia Flower Show. And over the course of that, I stayed at Dan and Peggy Ann's house here. And so Dan and Peggy Ann has created this really amazing garden in Wilmington, Delaware, which is just outside Philadelphia. And so I was able to really have this very intimate view into their garden. I was staying at their house. I had coffee in the garden in the morning with them. We walked around in the evening and had cocktails. And really this feel of this really inside view into someone's intimate space, intimate garden. And so that really inspired me to say, like, well, this needs to be told. And so I would say this and my friend Scott Eckley's garden in Seattle, Washington was really the major inspiration that got us to write this book. In your personal space, you really tend to push the boundaries. You tend to experiment a little bit more because you only answer to yourself. And I thought that was something that was really, really fun and really exciting with this whole, kickoff at Dan and Peggy Ann's. So the team was assembled. Obviously Allison, my wife, my business partner, my high school sweetheart was a huge part in this. And I have drug her into many things. She has a corporate background, but has been part of our family business now, and is really, I would say, the boss. It has been for the past 14 years. Our son was born 14 years ago next month, and so that's when she really kind of came over into the gardening side of things. And she did not come from a gardening background. Her dad really did most of that. And so it's been fun to see her evolution as a gardener over the course of so many years. And then Teresa Woodard, who's a great friend of ours and has written a number of articles about us in different publications. And so she just seemed like a great partner to partner up with during all this. So really, COVID hit. We had been watching, we had been binge watching things, watching Garden Masterclass. You know, when COVID hit, this great adaptation to technology. And I think the gardening world itself really came together. And that's why this crowd here today is so amazing, because we're still sharing information in that same format. And I think that was something that was so amazing and so inspiring from, you know, such a great tragedy in hindsight, you know, with this whole COVID thing. And so the gardening world came together. We were watching everyone on Instagram. We were watching stories. We were watching videos. We were getting inspired. And so we thought there was a great story to be told. We binge watched Monty Don's American Gardens. And, you know, I love Gardener's World. You know, we certainly watch it here. But I got to the end of that. I'm like, wow, I think there's a lot more to be told. And so we, you know, jumped into this whole storytelling endeavor. And the whole idea was the story about the gardener, killer images to rival anything that you would see in Gardens Illustrated, and then tangible learnings. You know, I always hate to get to the end of a story and you're like, well, I don't know what that specific cultivar was. I wish I knew some of the failures they had in their garden. So we really kind of put all that out there to really be really authentic in our storytelling. So we crisscrossed the country on the summer of 2021. We put on, I think it was closer to 30,000 miles between flying and driving. And we shot the book between about the end of May and the middle of September, and that was it. And we turned the book in at, I think it was September 19th. So this all really happened in a very, very, very tight time period. And essentially it's a moment in time. You know, we shot the garden once in the morning and once in the evening and once in the morning. So essentially it was shot 2 times and that was it. So this is a time capsule as well for these gardens, and really showing it at a certain time period. And like we said, this is not just about professional garden designers. Everyone here comes from a different background, different age, different ethnicities, different races. And so that's what's so amazing about the American garden. It really is a melting pot of different cultures and different experiences. And we have American roots. So what we found throughout this book in hindsight were some of the amazing themes that we didn't know we were going to get into when we started seeking out these gardeners. And the first is gravel gardenings. This is Jeff Epping outside Madison, Wisconsin. He really did this garden in the Beth Chatto style of gravel gardening. He took his house, which could be in any suburban neighborhood across the United States, and really dug up his entire front yard and did it in a gravel garden theme. And so what we're seeing in that a lot now with climate change and different aspects is a lot more volatility in rain and a really hot, dry summers as well. And so this kind of Mediterranean style planting of this gravel garden was really something he wanted for lower maintenance, and then to really give back a beautiful way and inspire all of his neighbors. Sean Conway as well. This is in Rhode Island, so on the East Coast of America. The same deal. This was a very traditional, what I would have called English border before. So very intense, a lot of deadheading, very intense garden, a lot of work. So Sean, as his life changed, he got older, his different focus in life, decided to rip out this garden and go with a gravel garden as well. And so this was really young. I would say probably only 6 to 9 months old when we were there to shoot it. But you can see the textures and difference that we're seeing here. And he was experiencing a lot more volatile rainfall as well. So you can see how beautiful these textures are. And but he kept his, what I call the bones of the garden intact. And so these chess pieces, these are Betulus fastigiata here. And so you can just see how beautiful these cylinder hornbeams are, creating this structure in this gravel garden. As well, one of the major themes throughout his garden is his purple beech hedge, the Fagus here, and that Fagus sylvatica in the background. And so you can just see how those tones, that color echoing really played off of this gravel gardening in the foreground. So Brant and Chelsea, they're in, again, a whole different kind of mentality of their gardening. They're very young, very much in the infancy of their gardening, but they're also interior designers and an engineer. So they came about it from a very different perspective. And this is in downtown Portland, Oregon, which is on the West Coast. So very much a different aesthetic. This is an Airbnb, a little cottage you can rent here in the foreground, which I was very fortunate to stay in when I went to go photograph the garden. But they came about this from a very different perspective. And this was one of their COVID projects. And so you can see this intimacy of this space, but also this color echoing. Their house is a very dark, kind of almost black, tobacco brown. And you can see how these Mediterranean colors and these, these really herb-driven perennial design here really plays off this house really well. And again, it's their family garden. They're a young couple, and their 2 cats roam the garden with them to really help out in the neighborhood. And this is in a very tight suburban area, with 0 lot lines, and the houses are really stacked on top of each other. And this was their first foray into vegetable gardening as well, which is in the front of their garden, so right there along the sidewalk. So it was really amazing to see. And over the course of COVID, the neighborhood congregated there as well to see what was going on. And so it was really amazing to see also their very limited color palette in this garden. It's something I'm really interested in as far as a very silver driven and silver and blue tones. Their story is really fascinating, and they don't come about it from a very plant driven background by any stretch of the imagination. They go with what they like. And so you can see these olives that they planted in this gravel. And so it makes the space very usable. There's no lawn to mow. And it's a very great permeable surface the rest of the year when they do have those heavy, intense rains in the wintertime. Vignettes is a big thing that we saw as well. So these really stylized areas throughout the garden. This is Erin. You might know her from YouTube, The Impatient Gardener. She tells a great story, and you can follow her on Instagram as well. This is Erin Shannon. She's out of Wisconsin, which is on the Great Lakes in the northern part of the Midwest. And so Erin's great at creating these annual displays with tender annuals and tubers as well. And you can see what she does here, and what I almost call a Dixter style of planting. This really, very intensive style of gardening she swaps out every year in this border, but you can see how beautiful this texture is. And then also these containers that she creates on the side of the house and then in this big border. Container gardening is a huge thing in what she does as well. And she tells the story so well. And I think one of my favorite things about Erin is she talks about her failures as much as she does of her triumphs. And so if you follow her, you can see she's constantly talking about what she's growing for this year. She's great at talking about her sources. And this was in September, and this is her window box that is just like trailing down the side of the house. It's like almost eating the house. And I just love this really beautiful texture driven, but also really exuberant kind of bright colors at the end of this season. And you can see here, I think one of the best things that I took from this garden was this purple basil, this purple Thai basil that really just made all the others pop this year of her planting. Paige is a good friend of ours. She's here in Ohio as well. And she has this very bucolic setting in the rural part of Ohio where she has created a wedding venue. And she's also great with creating these vignettes and containers that she stylizes in around her house. I think we'd call this a quintessential Ohio farmhouse that is just set in a really beautiful setting. It's very much different. I'd say the most rural setting of any of the gardens that we had in this book. But what she's able to create with these topiaries and these found objects that she uses as almost as hanging baskets, as window boxes is really amazing. These are just funnels, I think, from a dairy operation, and you get to see how that plays together. But a very traditional planting style with a lot of white hydrangeas, a lot of boxwood, and we're still able to use boxwood here quite a bit in Central Ohio. The blight is marginal, through good species selection as well, you can really ward it off pretty well. And so you do see that. And also, all these gardens are made for the animals that frequent them, from the cats, the dogs, the peacocks, or whatever it is. Paige really still tells the story really so beautifully through her rural barns, her just really, really fun atmosphere, and just really harnessing the light as well is a key thing in how her house was set up. She also does have a wedding venue here as well. You can see the greenhouse in the background, but this border of really, beautiful texture and smell was really key in creating that experience. It is a working farm, though. It's not just a garden, and so you can see how the sheep and the greenhouse interact with each other, and something that's so inspiring in how she tells the mood through the movement of the place. Like I said, this is a Lord and Burnham greenhouse here. So again, about 100 years old, that she found on the East Coast, and these reclaimed sidewalk stones that she used as this entrance into this greenhouse. They have a sale here once, a number of times a year, and 3 times a year they have a sale here, antique and garden fair, and so it's a lot of fun to go there and experience it. And so people get to wander the gardens, and it's really such an inspiring space. And I think one of my favorite parts of the shooting book was seeing the back behind the scenes of all these gardeners, right? We're like all these creative people who have these minds that wander from thing to thing, and so you're not always focused. And this was her flower arranging that she had set up just this day that she was getting ready for a wedding, and I just thought it was so beautiful, the buckets of flowers to be arranged for a wedding. I think it was actually that evening. So it's fun to see these creative aspects. Repurposing as well. So Tate is in Austin, Texas, is in the central part of the country, the south central part of the country. And so a very different climate, very warm in the summertime, easily over 100 degrees. And so you can see what he's so great at is finding these repurposed or objects that had a different life before them and placing them in and around his garden. These garden gates came from, a previous garden. And I just love how the turquoise and the patina of that rustiness echoes off the bamboo here. It struck me. These spheres came from a shopping mall right up the street that were going to be, otherwise thrown in the landfill and just be, rotting away for the next 1,000 years. So instead, he placed them in the garden, which this is a very spring driven area of the garden that is probably blooming right now as we speak in Texas. But this sphere is just, 36 inches tall, really huge against this found antler rack here. But, the use of light and the use of these amazing things really kind of drew me to Tate's garden. His use of Texas native plants as well is something that's really inspiring that he places in amongst his garden. But I think one of my favorite aspects was this grotto garden or this pool grotto that he created at the back of his garden. And this was really, leftover stone from projects. It was recycled fencing, and just how this pool tucks in along this rocky little hillside that they made was so amazing. It would just drew you straight in the garden. And I love how the planting came straight to the edge of the pool as well, something that isn't often seen here. And so I just love how that interaction of garden and pool, and you think about a pool most of the time is not being used. It really is essentially a reflecting pool. And so I think that reflection of these plants echoing in the glassiness of the pool is pretty amazing. And let's be honest, in 100 degree temperatures in the summertime, I think Tate deserves a pool after gardening all day. Keith Robinson, an amazing individual, a great friend, out of just outside Atlanta, Georgia. So kind of central southern, I would call that, on the East Coast. And so, gosh, he had a whole life in and of himself before this. He was a major event planner out of Atlanta, which is one of the largest cities in the United States. And so he had this really beautiful company in which they told stories. They hosted large events. And so he had all these relics from his past, in which he used for telling stories at these events indoors. And so they have now come into his garden. And so also Keith could be the most photogenic man I've ever met before in my life. He made my job very easy to photograph as he's going around the garden. But he ended up on this, it was a plantation house essentially, that he has a land lease on for the essentially the rest of his life, and which he's a caretaker now for this beautiful garden. But what Keith does is he's great at finding these objects. This gazebo here, the lattice came off our front porch that was on a house that was going to be demolished. The tin off a tin roof was from a house that was again going to be demolished. So he's not afraid to go up and ask and grab these things. And so it's now completely repurposed in this acid green gazebo that kind of welcomes you in the hot portion of the garden here. You can see this perennial border, and it's funny, when we were there to shoot, it was kind of in between blooms, but I really loved the aspect of this garden being just the textures and these strawberry planters that are so oversized. I mean, these are as tall as I am, so them being placed in here almost as sculpture instead, and you can see that color echoing of the salvia and the Cirsus canadensis there in the background of those darker foliage plants, and it really draws you in. And again, this is kind of a rural agricultural background, and so these relics of these tobacco stakes in these boxes, and I think it was just beautiful. I mean, Keith didn't know this was going to make it in the book, but this was just something that was really, as gardeners, we collect all these amazing items, and I just really love that aspect of it, all the tools and all the things that we use, from the planters and this clutch here that he uses in this vegetable plant to keep the bunnies away. But he's also very influenced by the European form of design, and you can see the London plane trees here in the background that he has bleached off, and this rigid structure of the garden. And one of the things that he has is he has a lot of found objects as well. This sorghum planter, he kept tripping over this thing in the back area of his, my daughter Charlotte just walked in, so she's in the background. Come say hi. She just got home from school. And this is Charlotte. And so he kept tripping over this piece of metal, and he started digging, and this is what he found. He found this bowl essentially in a part of his garden, and so it became really a centerpiece of his garden here as well. He also has had the luxury of traveling, and this white oak French bathtub has made it back to the garden with these, this moment in time, this digitalis here, like 30 digitalis plants planted. But I think sometimes less is more, and just the simplicity of this planting really is really, really striking. And it is, essentially like a flower arrangement, but I think it's something that's really beautiful to have as a centerpiece. Beauty and the Imperfect. That is imperfect. I just noticed I spelled that wrong there. But you can see here, Jeanette Bell, a beautiful person, amazing person, out of New Orleans. And she has a garden that was really very stricken by Hurricane Katrina. And this was under feet of floodwater when that hurricane came through. And so it was a relic, or an abandoned lot that was once a halfway house. But you can see how she's taken this lot and really turned it as something that's really quite beautiful. She uses it as flower arrangements, and also harvesting food to give back to the community locally. And so something that we see that is not, by the book, a perfect garden, to me is so beautiful, and how she uses her garden is something that's so inspiring. And she uses items that are, otherwise thrown out or recycled. The nursery, a plastic nursery pot here, she uses for growing this Swiss chard that is sold off, and again another brassica here. You can see just growing this container that otherwise could have been thrown away. I think one of the funniest things is she's turned this large trash can into this strawberry planter that was something I had never seen done before, but really was really innovative. And I think that's something to be said about all these gardeners. They're so innovative, and they don't take what an item is just for granted. They look at how they can use it. And again, she collects, she has a large rose collection. You can see here on the silhouette of the next door building, and the quintessential balconies of New Orleans. Just really amazing, and she's an amazing person that really gives back so much. And what she does is she sells these flower arrangements from these recycled wine bottles at the local market, and people will order for their dinner parties. And I think it's just really, really something that's so amazing. And while we were in the garden, so many people walked by and yelled and said, "Hey, Jeanette." So she's really this kind of this centerpiece of this garden or this community, and really something that's so inspiring. I think one of the most amazing, and I think something we need a lot more of in the United States, is this rewilding. And rewilding is, is kind of one of those words that is being thrown around a lot these days, just like sustainability was a couple of years ago. But this rewilding and thinking about the garden for more so than just the purpose of our personal enjoyment. So it's personal enjoyment plus the aesthetic value of and the giving back to the greater ecology of the space. And so many of these gardens give back and have such a wildlife aspect to it. And this is at Seconic Gardens in Little Compton, Rhode Island, which is on the East Coast and just south of Boston. And so you look at this garden and it's really amazing. It's hard to get the scale, and we'll get there in a second. But the biggest, their major theme for this aspect of their garden is pollinator plus. So they want every plant in this garden to have a hole in it because it's being eaten or used by a pollinator. And so this was an area of the garden that was overrun by invasive species. It was multiflora rose, it was honeysuckle. And so this was one of their COVID projects as well. They took this garden and flipped it into this amazingly wild. So here's a scale, and you can see Johnny and Michael here in the middle. That gives you the scale of what this garden is and the heights and what they're achieving through their Sanjusorbas and Agastache and their dill here. So everything is meant to be in there is meant to give back to the greater ecology. And there's a boardwalk that runs through it, which is really amazing, through these tens of thousands of plants. So you're just like overrun by this amazing jungle and the buzz of all the pollinators, bees, flies, wasps, all the amazing things that we have here. And the bird life that came through is really something, and it's really an amazing aspect. And I think their pollinator house as well is one of the coolest I've seen. And they come from a very different background. Johnny designed exhibits for the Bronx Zoo. He was a landscape architect, and that was his background. And Michael came from retail background, where he worked for likes of Ralph Lauren and things like that. So these two creative minds came together to create this garden that has been many years in the making, but really for the past 5-6 years, really full on. And so if you're in the United States, the Garden Conservancy, they have open days. They also have a garden fair coming up here in early May, I believe. I think it's early or mid-May. And they're also good friends with Fergus Garrett, great Dixter. And you can see that influence here. A number of us are good friends with Fergus. He's someone that we've gotten to know very well over the years, and has had major influence on us, for sure. But again, it's this quintessential New England salt box house with these shaker sides and everything. And I think one of the amazing things is everything in this garden has a purpose, from Michael's hat here to the geraniums that match the front door. I mean, literally that geranium and that paint color are dead perfect. I think it's something that's really amazing. And it's something that's a designer eye. But the reason that Michael wears this really bright orange hat is because it's so Johnny can find him in the garden when he's bent over, standing up. So it's really amazing, and something that is it's fun personality comes through. And then surrounding their garden here is this pasture that does get cut twice a year by a farmer, but this mix of legumes and grasses that really is used for agriculture, but also for pollination and bird migration as well, is really, really amazing. You can see this pulled back shot here. And this was one of my favorite shots. This was early morning. A hurricane was barreling up the East Coast. Now I'm on a 16-foot tall orchard ladder here, like shooting back towards the house. And we have another garden to go to. We shot Sean Conway's garden later that afternoon. So it was hurry up and go kind of deal. And it was really, really amazing. But these guys really, are an amazing story to tell in amongst so many gardeners in the United States, but what they're doing and their personalities are really amazing. And if you can make it there to their garden, I would highly suggest it. It's not just about this rewilding. There are many, many rooms in which you go through, many stories to tell. It is a garden room. It's an experience. It's this aspect of it's about an acre. And the pastures around and their paddocks are more, but these walled gardens, these amazing stories, this tropical area where they leave their palms outside all winter. They leave them in the garden, these pedicides and these bananas that are in the garden is really, really amazing. This came on a boat back with them from Indonesia. It came with, I think it was 2 or 3 too few of the piers to make it. So they improvised and they made it work, but one of these amazing chess pieces in the garden that really draw them in. I don't know if you can see their corgi there laying on the floor, but they have 3 corgis that follow you around the garden, and it's really, really a fun experience to be there. Ben Vos in Nebraska, so he is literally reprairing his section of the United States. He came from the American prairie, and now there's like less than 1% of the prairie left in America, and so he's single-handedly doing it in his front yard. And you can see here how amazing this is to see this front yard, and you can see it's any suburban neighborhood here. So he's really doing it in a guerrilla gardening style. And it's really amazing to see what he's doing with natives and all these perennials. I'm going a little long here, so I'm gonna scoot through some of these photos here. Peter and Stephen in upstate New York, again, doing that rewilding, really looking at this beautiful story. Again, all these stories are in the book, so I hope this is just enticing you to get American roots. And you can see this kind of style of pruning that they have, Dixter-esque as well, in their garden. I think one of the major ones is John Holm out of upstate. He's out in Bedford, New York, outside New York City. And he came from a different background as well, of being a restaurateur, working some of the best garden restaurants in New York City. He's really created this entire garden to really be an amazing experience, from a spiralis meadow to an alpine garden, and all these amazing things. It's really one of those gardens you can see he hand planted this spiralis meadow by plug, and it's really an amazing thing to experience the light twice a day hitting the heads of these spiralis, prairie drop seed, Great American Native. I think one of the amazing things that we saw too was these are 3 plants that we saw in every part of the country, good, bad, or otherwise. So the agave americana is something that we saw in every aspect. In the north, we saw it in containers, and down south, we saw it planted. Amsonia hubretii, an amazingly textured American Native, awesome plant, almost fern-like texture, very soft to touch. And then Chasmanthium latifolium. In some parts of the country, it is invasive. Other parts of the country, it naturalizes and stays tidy. These are plants that we saw everywhere. And then our house as well, which you're going to have to read about in our book. But this is our garden here. This is Little Miss Charlotte in our back garden. But our garden is an experiment. It's a proving ground. It's where we have really decided to experiment with different perennials, different textures. Really, we don't have any irrigation here. These are all plants that need to survive the summer, survive the heat, and our cold winter temperatures. So this is our garden. This is what we do. Follow me on Instagram. You'll get a lot more stories of it. Buy American Roots, and you get to read all about our stories as well. And it's been an amazing journey. And we thank Garden Masterclass for being on here. We're going to answer some questions as well. But yeah, thank you so much for paying attention. I'm going to get here to this last slide. You feel free to reach out to me as well. This is there's my Instagram handle, and please follow me there. And then also, if you have any questions, shoot me an email or direct message.
And you can put your questions in the chat right now and catch him live right here.
Yeah.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
You mentioned Aaron, and you mentioned social media being very important during COVID. How many of these gardens did you find through social media?
Yeah, it's funny. A number of these did come from social media. It came from Instagram. It came from a blog or whatever. But these were people, many of them were ones I was following before, or we were friends, right? And that's just how we were keeping up over the course of COVID. But a number of them, like Keith, I didn't know Keith. Now he's a great friend. But I literally messaged him on Instagram, like, hey, can I come shoot your garden? I've always admired your style. And so that's literally how it happened. As like Instagram stalking some of these people in a completely appropriate way. But it's like, that's how I got to know them. And you feel like these people before you meet them. And I think that's one of the amazing aspects of social media. Social media gets such a bad rap so many times, but for a community like gardening, it's such a great way to bring people together.
And there are times when during the season, when you're so busy, there's just no way to do anything except catch up with somebody when you have 5 minutes after they're already asleep and know that they'll get back to you before.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I mean, otherwise it can just be a very, your time is so consumed during the season. And our season in the US is a little bit different in comparison to many places in the UK. The Northeast and Northern Midwest, our season is much more compact than other places. And so if this is how you're making your living, you are running full on from the first day of spring until probably Christmas, right?
Yeah, I would say that's fair. Yeah, but and again, the gardening world is a small, it's literally worldwide, right? I mean, and so I think that's a great thing. It really breaks down boundaries, Instagram, social media, and we talk the language of plants, and I think that's what's the amazing thing. And that's why so many of these things in our book are relevant to people outside the United States, because it's the themes, it's the learnings, it's the mentality in which someone went about gardening. And that's the story we're really trying to tell, is the creativity behind the gardening, and then get down in the tangible learnings as well.
One of the things that was so interesting to me about this book, and I'm saying this as somebody who has a huge stack of books that I mean to get to. It's a struggle for me to read. I read your book cover to cover, and what the experience was like was, after I finished reading it, it was kind of washing over me. And Nick, there's somebody in the book, I don't remember who had planted culinary turmeric and grown it and had it flower. I now have turmeric that I'm trying to grow. So that when it washes over you, then there's also this encouragement to be inspired by the book. And so I'm kind of in the process.
That's awesome. Well, thank you.
That effect of it.
Well, it is, you read it and you digest it, and it gets into your subconscious, right? And I think that's one of those things.
Exactly. You never know when it's going to emerge.
You don't know.
Be an inspiration. One of the things that struck me at the beginning, I said that this was your COVID baby. And one of the things that struck me about the collection of gardens that you brought to us is that community, socializing, being together in the spaces that you presented seemed to me a key theme. Do you think it's always been that way? Did you pick these gardens because of that? Or did people feel more drawn to create these outdoor getting together spaces that were 6 feet apart during COVID? Is that a new thing?
Well, I mean, for us, it's been the way that we've lived our entire life. I mean, I grew up outdoors. I grew up on a strawberry farm. I think COVID was one of those great resets where you look at what's important to you, right? And I think alone in the United States, they said we gained about 16 to 18 million new gardeners over the course of COVID. And so, creating these spaces that are healthy or alive, or an ecosystem in and of themselves, I think is something that certainly COVID really ramped up quite a bit. And for everyone in this book, I think it was second nature already. It's how they lived. But you look at Brant Chelsea in Portland, I mean, that's how they were able to keep, it's how you were able to get together with your neighbors. It's how you were able to socialize. So it had a huge effect. And it was also a very important part of, picking these gardens, because that's I think one of the most amazing aspects of it.
Nick, we have a question from Helena. What did you learn about American gardeners and gardening in America from your research and your travel, your 22,000 miles around the US?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I like where do you? That's a loaded question. Where do you?
25 words or less.
Yeah. I mean, I think the resiliency of the American gardener, right? I mean, a garden's never done, right? It's never finished. It's ever evolving, and I think that everyone this has been a process for everyone. It all hasn't gone perfectly. It you hone in your design aesthetic as well over the course of your or your evolution of the garden as well. And so I think not being afraid to edit, not being afraid to put a spin on your garden as it evolves is something that's really important, and it has happened in all these gardens. So I think that's something that is great. And I also learned that a lot of American gardeners love to shower outside. I think almost like half the gardens had outdoor showers. So we really want to be
That
one
is a revelation.
feature.
I did not know that.
And we all love it. We generally love a gin and tonic in the garden while we're walking around too. So that's another fun aspect of it.
One of the things I noticed about the photographs in the book, it seemed to me that there was more of an emphasis on grasses and foliage,
Yeah.
and not as much kind of riot of color. Is that just because of
Yeah.
the time of year you were there, or was that more of a
It's funny. There are certainly some of the gardens that have a fair amount of color, but I think this whole switch, personally, I do love designing with texture over color. Color can be fleeting, and don't get me wrong, I do love it, and you saw some of that in some of the photos. But I mean, I think grass in general, grasses are a great way to sustain in a garden, to have a lower footprint, a lower maintenance as well. And I think texturally, as really the masses learn to design with grasses, it can give such a reward back. As you look at John's meadow there at the end is Spiralis Meadow, and man, it's unbelievably beautiful. And to me, it's just as good as any kind of hot or blooming border as well. It's just a different kind of beauty. And so I think we have Pete Rudolph to thank a lot for that, because of the High Line, and I guess that whole new perennial movement, which he's been doing for so long. And obviously there's many books about it, and Noel has teamed up with Pete on a lot of those, and so really appreciating the beauty through the beauty of decay, the beauty of the skeleton of the plants and those sorts of things, and the skeleton of these beautiful plants otherwise. I think it's just a new appreciation on beauty. Yeah.
I have to comment that the number of hedges and the amount of boxwood was kind of breathtaking to me, because was it 2018 or 2019? We had this incredible infestation with boxwood blight in my area. There was one story I heard about a wholesale nursery that got a shipment in and had to can $40,000 worth of plants, and that's probably just a minor story. So are you thinking, I mean, with boxwood, box tree moth has been found right across the lake from Ohio and in certain states in the United States, although I don't think it's really horrible anywhere yet. Are you thinking about other materials to use, and have you started experimenting with them?
Yeah, for
Some
sure.
of us are over boxwood.
Yeah. And I would say in general, we don't use a lot of boxwood anymore. We're experimenting with certainly different things. Again, also the taxes yew as well is something that we're seeking alternatives for, and we're really doing a lot of that. Like in my garden, our hedges are Thuja placata, the Western arborvitae, which really does an amazing job. The deer won't touch it. We're looking, and those are my taller hedges. And so you look at the culture that's very low. They're great. They're like a hedgerow planting where they give back so much life. They're a great nesting for songbirds in the gardens as well. And so we're learning to cultivate different things to achieve a very similar feel, but a completely different species to do that. And so we're always pushing them, and that's why it's great in my garden. I have no one to answer to, right? So it's really me who's to answer for any of it, and I love it. So yeah. But I would say in general, boxwood, first the longevity of them, and then also the cost of them alone is exponentially high because of all the complications with them.
Yeah, just the boxwood leaf miner is a huge problem where
Oh,
we are, and it's practically, you can almost count on finding it in a garden, and if you don't, you know that somebody has been there with a midicloprid, neonicotinoids, so
for sure.
it's tough. Lots of lovely comments for you, which I will be passing your way, Nick. And I guess one thing that I wanted to comment on about the book and about talking to you is that for new gardeners, or even for established gardeners, your book and you are so approachable. I feel as though there's, we have an advocate out there to go and get your hands dirty, be creative, and don't be afraid to explore.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. That means a lot. And, you know, that's one of the most important things in everything we did in this book, and what we do in our everyday is to be authentic and tell the story how it is, and to not Photoshop things that don't need Photoshopped, right? We just wanted to tell the story of the American gardener. We want to tell the story of us, and we want to do it so it makes it so everyone sees they can do it. You know, there might be some mistakes, but that's okay. At the end, you can have some amazing results for sure.
Well, the narrative form of the book is a true example of when the student is ready, the teacher appears. You read the narrative, you get inspired, and there is the advice for you. So thank you so much, Nick McCullough. The book again is American Roots. If you want to unshare, I'll get this onto a big screen. Can you, unshare, Nick, unshare your screen and we'll get the big picture of it on there. Can you unshare? Go down to the book. Yeah, okay. Well, I'll try. Here, okay, there you go, folks. That's the book. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for this American Odyssey. Annie and Noel will be back next week for another exciting episode of Thursday Garden Chat. Have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.